I'm going to show you in this video how to repair what seems like is impossible to repair. What happened here is this guy tried to remove bolts in his exhaust housing for his Evo 9 and drilled them off center and way too far. Part of the bolts were actually still stuck in the housing even though he missed the hole really bad, like way off. So we had to remove the bolts or what was left of the bolts that was in the housing and recorrect the housing by welding up the area that didn't need to be drilled. Then after welding that up, we have to drill it back in its correct location and helicoil it. You can do this several ways. You can fix this housing several ways. I chose to do it this way. I just felt more comfortable doing it this way. If you wanted to weld up the whole housing and re-drill and tap, you could do it that way. You could also just try your best to carve it out to use a time cert, but I think it was just too far off center for me to be able to do that. So that's the reason why I chose to do it the way that I did, and you'll be able to see how well this turned out after I did all my work to it, because it looks so much better, and this guy won't have to worry about having issues with bolting the housing on and by using nuts on the back of it and not having the correct alignment. I'm missing some threads on this side where I welded it because I didn't weld it enough in the back. But this will be enough to hold it, so I'm not really that worried about it. I only just have to insert our coil. Here's how it finally turned out doing the helicoil job. You can see how the gasket is centered up. You can see where I had to weld in on this corner. And then on this one I had to weld in the top area to move it back down here. So now, because I accidentally hit the surface, I'm going to have to remove this one and surface it all so it's all perfectly flat again. This one, I'm kind of afraid about it breaking in there, and then I'll have to drill that one out probably. Anytime the Evo 9 or Evo 8 turbine housings are removed, or even the Evo 10, they always have to be retapped because the housing swells and traps the bolts and the studs in. The reason for that is because of the nickel material that's added into the casting. It helps the housing last a lot longer, and it helps protect it from heat. But the downside is that it usually swells up and then traps the bolts in there. So it's pretty common that I have to drill these out anytime somebody wants to do an upgrade or a rebuild. On this one, I didn't drill these bolts to begin with. This was sent to me, so the only thing I was supposed to do was just do the rebuild. But I told them that I could fix these for them. These threads are 10 millimeter by 1.25. To do the helicoil job, you're supposed to use the helicoil tap, but all I had was the 12 by 1.25 tap, which seems to be the size for the helicoils. And the reason I use that tap is because the helicoil tap always breaks when I go to do a job like this, because it's really hard to tap through this material. When you go to buy a tap to tap through this, you really need a high-speed steel one, because the cheap ones don't work very well. I think I pay like $5 to $10 a piece per tap. These are really good quality taps, though they didn't withstand the welds very well. At first this one worked really good, but the point when it started breaking was I didn't realize that it was in there crooked, and it had an area where it wasn't tapping it through because the material was too thick, so it sheared off. Then I had to sharpen it. Then once I sharpened it, it was really hard to get it started. So the way I was able to fix that was you just really have to just cut all the thread off, or the cutting flutes off, and just start at the next flute and get a fresh cut on it. But these taps are pretty well destroyed, so that's kind of just the cost involved of being able to fix this. Sometimes the taps get broken. Now, if you were to fix this, make sure you go over your options, because this may not be the best option for you to fix your housing. If the bolt was just broke, I would have just drilled it out and removed it, or grinded it out. But because the holes were already bored out too big, I'm stuck with having to either fill it in or grind it out bigger and tap it to a different size. Now, I would have had the option to use a time cert, but I don't have that on hand, so that's why I didn't use that. The time cert seemed kind of expensive. It looks like a kit for that's about 85 bucks. And then I think it's either $4 a pack for time certs or $4 a piece. I was looking up online, but I didn't really look at the details too much. The time cert, you would tap this out to 14 millimeter, and then you would insert the time cert into this. So that probably would have been a better option than having to weld it. But the reason I welded it is because it was so far off center that it needed to come back to center. So if I was trying to get it bored out to that 14 millimeter for the 14 millimeter tap, I would be guessing at where that hole needed to be with a porting tool to try and get it out right, because the drill bits, I couldn't use the drill bits at that point. Either way, it was kind of a hard job. Here's the finished product after I surfaced it down. These are the two holes that were already good, and then these are the ones that I had to repair. This one, you can see where I welded it in this area. And this one, you can see where I welded it right on the top area. So let's see how good the gasket fits. That hole looks pretty much perfect. This one, it's a little off center, but I mean, for a hand drill, you really can't get that much closer than that. So I'm feeling like it'll still be close enough to bolt through the manifold without having to drill out the manifold or anything. It's pretty darn close.